Welcome to the live stream from Prescott Historique, and we've got some really interesting cars and drivers. We've had a great morning when our full entry have done their 2 practice runs, 1 or 2 incidents and accidents, but I'm glad to say nothing desperately serious. If you're here in person, welcome. Hope you're enjoying the lovely sunshine. If you're watching online in another country, bonjour, guten morgen, good day if you're in Australia. And if you're watching for the first time, very briefly tell you where Prescott is in the UK. We're in the middle and slightly to the left. So in the county of Gloucestershire, near the town of Cheltenham and the city of Gloucester, in an area of England called the Cotswolds, which is a range of hills in the Midlands, beautiful countryside, and Prescott is nestling in a fold in the Cotswolds. And on the screen we've got an overhead view of the course. Starting, the blue starts down bottom right, and cars accelerate pretty quickly under the bridge and into Orchard, a long sweeping left-hander. We've got a speed trap just after the bridge. The top hill climbers are doing 110, 115 at that point, which just illustrates how quick how quick the top hill climb class is. Then into Ettore, named after, of course, Ettore Bugatti, right-hand hairpin, bit of a sweep downhill, and then straight up to Pardon, left-hand hairpin, and then along the top there's a timing beam at midway, swerves right and into the S's, left, right, left. Quite a challenging series of corners. Lots of incidents take place there. Then a straight burst up to the semicircle, which isn't quite a hairpin, but it's almost 180 degrees right-hand bend, with a drop-off on the outside, which can be a bit scary, but actually is relatively benign, and then 100 yards or so to the finish. So that's Prescott. We have a return road, so you won't see cars coming down the hill in batches after their runs, which you might have seen at Chelsea Walsh and other hill climbs. We are kicking off at 10 minutes to 2. And I think our first cars are the Bugattis, appropriately, since Prescott is the home of the Bugatti Owners Club and has been since 1938. The hill was actually found by the Vintage Sports Car Club when the estate was for sale, and they were very keen to buy it but couldn't afford it, so they tipped the wink to the wealthy young men of the Bugatti Owners Club, who snapped it up because they saw the potential of the drive up to the house at the top of Pardon Hill as a hill climb track. And the first competitive meeting here was, I think, in August 1938. And then, of course, it was interrupted by World War II and started again in 1946. And in 1959, the course was extended. Originally, the course turned sharp right. On the screen, you can see, slightly to the left of the middle of the screen, the sharp right-hand bend up to Pardon. Well, in 1959, the course was extended through Orchard Corner up to Ettores and then back down the slope and then straight up to Pardon, which made a complete difference to the hill. But the Vintage Sports Car Club come here once a year for their big meeting in August, and it's a great meeting to come to. And for that meeting, we still use the original short course. Although they do also have a one-day meeting later on in the year, which is the Vintage Sports Car Club experiencing the full course for a change. That's only been running for the last couple of years or so. Clerk of the course goes up the hill, checking that it's all clear and we're ready to kick off. I can't see cars lining up on the exit to the paddock at the moment, but they will soon be there. We've got 4 Bugattis competing this afternoon. We've got Julian Eckersley in the Bugatti Type 13, the famous Brescia Bugatti, celebrating a win by Bugatti at Brescia in Italy. Then we've got a Type 35B, which is not in your program, which is being driven by Mr. Balfour instead of the car that he's entered in, which is number 34, the Talbot AV105. I'm pretty sure he's decided to run his Type 35B Bugatti instead of that. Then we have 2 Bugatti Type 51s, the famous Grand Prix Bugatti, which introduced to Bugatti the twin cam shaft cylinder head, inspired by the American Miller company. Mr. Bugatti Ettore was great friends with Mr. Miller, and so it wasn't industrial espionage, but Ettore saw the twin cam Miller and thought, that's going to give my Type 35 a lot more power, and it did. I think the 51 has about 30 more horsepower than the Type 35B. And nice to see Ed Burgess and Tim Dutton in their Type 51s. What else to look out for? Well, in the All-Comers Handicap, we welcome again to Prescott the ERA R4D, maybe the most famous ERA of all, driven in period by Raymond Mays, of course, by Ken Wharton. All sorts of famous drivers have driven R4D, one of the few ERAs with independent front suspension, and originally had a huge Zoller supercharger just under the steering wheel between the driver's legs, which must have been a little bit disconcerting. It still has a supercharger, it's still in the same place, but it's not quite as big and extreme as the original Zoller, but it produced huge amounts of power for R4D. And with it, Raymond Mays won the HillClimb Championship. After the war, Ron Flockhart, famous Scottish racer, both raced and hill climbed it. Tragically, he decided to try and break the Australia to UK flight record in a P51 Mustang, and in practicing for that, sadly, he got caught out in the clouds in Australia and crashed the Mustang and died. So we've got R4D. We also have, I suppose you could describe it as a brand new ERA. It's what I prefer to call a two-room copy of an ERA, using a lot of original parts, including an original engine, ex-R4D. So it's a 2-litre ERA. We shall see it when it comes up on the hill. It's in very period pale-ish green colours. But to my surprise, we've got a lightweight E-Type coming up to do a demonstration run. This is an original lightweight E-Type. I think they build 15 of them originally, although Jaguar have built some follow-ons. But this one was raced by Stirling Moss, and at Goodwood it was raced by Wyn Percy, so it's got a great racing history. And the lightweight had as you can tell by the name, it had much more light bodywork. It also had an aluminium block engine. Never really was competitive against the Ferrari GTOs and short wheelbase Ferraris, but great to see a lightweight E-Type here, just doing a demo, which is great to see. Lots of people have made replica lightweights, but they are never the complete thing. I call them light heavyweights because officially I think they're called semi-lightweights, but this is the genuine article. Following the Jaguar, we've got a very famous Cooper Formula One car from 1959. Belonged to the Rob Walker stable. Rob, great enthusiast and sponsor of cars from his headquarters at Pipbrook Garage in Dorking. And this one, with this one, Stirling Moss competed in the 1959 Grand Prix Championship, and during that period he won two Grand Prix. He won the Portuguese Grand Prix down in Oporto, and at the end of the season he won the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, which was incredible because with its 2.5 litre Coventry Climax engine it was giving away some power to the Ferraris. They deliberately ran it with wire wheels that were attached to the car with one big knock-on spinner, and part of the reason for doing that was to fool the Italian entries by pretending that they were going to have to make a pit stop. So the Ferraris came rushing into pits 2/3 of the way through the race for what they thought was going to be the necessary pit stop, and Stirling in the Cooper went blithely on, never stopped at all, and won the race and clinched the manufacturer's championship for Cooper that year, 1959. Belongs to Richard Wilson, who has a lovely collection of classic racing cars, including a front-engine Ferrari Dino, the last front-engined Ferrari Grand Prix car. We've got a Mallock coming up to the line. I don't think this is a competitive run. Or am I wrong? And it is. It's Peter Thurston in the Mark IV Mallock, number 61. He's competing in the Bugatti Owners Club Fassi Classic Speed Championship, and this Mallock no longer has the classic pushrod engine. It's got a Lotus twin cam engine, so it's quick. But Mallock is still in business, of course, Ray Mallock, and they were revolutionary, producing the clubman's class of racing cars, but they also raced in Formula 3, and when Arthur Mallock came to the grid in his little U2 Mallock, looking just like this but without wings and lights, of course, all the people in their sophisticated rear-engine Formula 3 cars rather scoffed at this funny little thing until it started beating them all. So Peter Thurston well on his way. He's followed by Mike White in the well-known MG Special, concoction of MGA and MGB parts, which Mike has competed in for a long, long time. We've got a time for Peter Thurston of 46.56, and Mike, on his way from the S's up to semicircle, is followed by Chris Wigder in another Mallock, very similar to Peter Thurston's, and Chris has had this car resprayed in yellow and blue and is collecting funds on behalf of Ukraine. One contributor to his fund has been David Richards, who's chairman of Motorsport UK, who has put 25 grand of his own money into getting an armoured ambulance, which they will be sending over to Ukraine. Mike White's time in the MG Special, 61.59. Chris Wigdor has just finished with a 51.74, and he's followed by Carol Nichols in her Nike, called a Nike because her dad was Ken Nichols, and he built chassis frames for his own Nike cars, but also for people who crunched their Brabhams or Lotuses. And Carol's had this car for 5 or 6 years in tribute to her dad. She's finished with a 54.72, and she's followed by John Louch in this A40 Farina, first popular hatchback, so revolutionary from BMC's point of view. And if you've watched Goodwood Revival, you'll see lots of A40s duffing up the Jaguars and the Ford Galaxies. He's finished with a 59.42, and here comes Lee Carter in his Fiat Abarth, the little Abarth based on the Fiat 500, but with much more power and with the boot lid always open to keep the engine cool, which was great competition in European Touring Car Championships against the Minis in their Tiddler class. Carlo Abarth was a great genius at extracting lots of power from Fiat engines. So Lee is finished with a 64.25. He's followed by Martin Saunders in this very elegant Ford Escort Mark I with a 2-litre engine, flared arches like and the original Escort, the Mark I, was a great rally car. And you'll remember that there was a set of the Escorts called the Mexico, celebrating the win by Ford Escort in the London to Mexico Rally. So Martin is nearing the finish, and he's followed by Ian Stringer in very pretty 2-litre Alfa Giulia Sprint. Ian used to share my Formula 2 March hill climbing 20 or so years ago, and he was a great co-driver, always reliable. Lifts the front wheel coming out of the S's and heads for the finish. Let's check on his time. It's a 54.46. Mark Maynard in the Hillman Imp. Ooh, blocks his front wheels into Pardon, gets away with it successfully. Imp, of course, rear-engined with the engine based on the Coventry Climax design, all aluminium, of course, because Roots Group wanted to keep as little weight as possible at the back of the car. Swing axle front suspension, and finishes with a 52.04. Talking minis, here's Matt Clark. And Matt's a very original looking early Mini with the Austin 7 radiator grille, but this one's quick, and its engine has been increased in size to 1460 cc's, which means that not only has it been given a bigger bore, but it's a bigger stroke as well. And we'll see what time Matt does. It's 50.72. Here's Dave Parr in his much modified Ford Anglia. I remember when the Anglia first came out in about 1958 and was sensational with its backward sloping rear window, which everyone thought was revolution. We've seen this car doing a demo run, taking a competition winner up the hill. I hope Mark Begley enjoyed that. Dave gets near to the finish, and he's followed by another big-engined Austin Mini in the hands of Andy Clark. David in the Anglia finishes with a 56.6. And Andy is already into the S's with his very elegant Cooper in Works Cooper colours with the dark green and the white stripes, reminiscent of the likes of John Rhodes, John Whitmore racing minis in period. Here's a Mark II Escort in the hands of Mark Hobbs. For many people, not such a pretty shape as the Mark I, but again, the Mark II was a great rally car with lots of successes. And again, this one with a 2-litre engine. I don't know if it's a full BDG, I don't think so. Gary Cox follows in the Reliance Scimitar. Mark Hobbs in the Ford Escort 51.9. Gary Cox in the Scimitar GTE, that's the hatchback version of the Reliance Scimitar, which started life as a coupe, and you'll see one pretty soon. But it was a sensation to have a sports car with a hatch at the back. Princess Anne, of course, kept getting stopped for speeding in her GTE. And here's Brian Ashley in an Austin A35. A35s have become extremely popular because there's a race series for them, and there was a race for A30s and A35s at Goodwood at the revival a few years ago. The result of which was lots of A30s and A35s got dug out of scrapyards and barns and things and fettled and gained hugely in value. So Brian Ashley finishes with a 55.43. Gary Cox 53.81, and now we've got another lovely Alpha, this time in the hands of Terry Clifford, who's had a long hill climb career in single-seaters, Pilbeam two-seaters, and now has decided to calm down a bit and drive this lovely Alfa Romeo GT Junior, but with a 2-litre engine. Here's number 70 again, the dark red A40, this time in the hands of Steve Louch. We saw John do a 59.42 in this car 10 minutes or so ago. Let's see what Steve can do. Chucking it through the S's is another Fiat 695 SS Abarth going around to Torres and heading up towards Harden. Time for Steve in the A40, 56 seconds exactly. We follow the Fiat on the screen. Lovely to have a small car, so it doesn't matter that the hill track is a bit narrow. You've got plenty of room to shuck it round, particularly around the S's. And David Fripp is followed by Tim Cross in a little 1970 MG Midget. Again with the A-Series BMC engine bored out to 1380cc, which is about as big as you can get the bore without the daylight coming in. David Fripp has finished with a 63.24. Watching Tim Cross navigating out of Tom Road corner, the exit to the S is named after great author and engineer Tom Road. He's finished with a 56.85. He's followed by Charles Bolton, who's driven MGBs of various shapes and colours for a long time. But this one has the 3.5-litre Rover V8 engine, which BMC themselves only applied to the GT, the closed MGB. Although the original idea for shoving a V8 engine in an MGB was, I can't remember his name, was it Chris Lawrence, with an open one. Charles finishes with a 56.98, to be followed by Ted Elwes. This is the predecessor to the MGB and the last sports car MG with a separate chassis, the MGA. Bodywork, lovely shape of the bodywork, inspired by the Mille Fraser Nash, and Ted Elwes has had this car for donkey's years. He fitted it with an MGB engine, so it's a bit quicker than the standard MGA, but it's always immaculately prepared and presented. He's finished with a 56.75. Now we've got Stephen Akers in the first of our lands. We've missed him. We focus on Douglas Chipperfield in this Mark III MG Midget. Mark II and the Mark III, following on from the famous Frog Eye Sprite. Midget was always a slightly posh version of the Sprite. We didn't really see much of Stephen Akers in his Elan, but he competed. He did a 55.37. Douglas Chipperfield in the MG Midget is followed by Les. Is this Les Buck in the Lotus? Unusual to see Les driving a Lotus Elan, but isn't it a nice one? Dark green, British racing green, slightly smoky on the overrun, which is characteristic of the Lotus twin cam engine. Nice clearances. And Douglas Chipperfield finishes with a 54.97. Les Buck in the Elan heads for the finish, to be followed by Keith Wilson in yet another MG Midget. This is a Mark 1 Midget because the Frog Eye never had an MG version. Famous Frog Eye with the headlights sticking up to comply with American regulations. Originally they were going to have pop-up headlights like the Lotus Elan, but sensibly decided not to. But the shape of the Frog Eye did put some people off, which is why the Mark II Sprite had a much more conventional shape and more conventional rear suspension, because the Frog Eye had quarter elliptics, whereas the Mark II Sprite had a more semi-elliptic rear suspension. We're following Terry Cox. I told you that the GTE Reliant was preceded by the Coupe, and here is one, 3-litre Reliant Scimitar Coupe. Both of them have the Essex Ford V6 engine. Now we go back to 1929 with the MG M-Type of Frank Ashley. This was MG's first sports midget, based on the Morris Minor of the period, and they were great fun, the little MG M-Type 3-speed gearbox, but very popular for young blades who nowadays would buy, what would they buy nowadays? An MX-5, I suppose. But my first car was an MG M-Type like this, and had lots of fun with it. Canvas body, pointed tail, so it was the car that followed on from this, the J2, that had the famous slab petrol tank at the back and the spare wheel hanging onto that. So we'll keep an eye on Frank Ashley's time, 72.98, to be followed by Joe Tisdall in this very pretty Austin Ulster from 1930. Lots of Austin 7s have been converted into Ulsters by chucking away the saloon body and giving them a replica Ulster body, but I believe this one to be the real thing. There you are, MG J2. There's the slab tank on the back, and when you're not competing in a hill climb, you screw the spare wheel onto the back by the fuel tank. That's Stephen Rees with his J2. He's followed by Chris Table in his 1935 Riley Special. Classic underslung Riley chassis, so very low car, no centre of gravity. Stephen Rees in the J2 still going. Joe Tisdall, 71.69. Very pretty Riley Special of Chris Tabor. And here's another modified Fiat, a Fiat Abarth, but this is a bigger one. This is the OT 850, based on the best-selling Fiat 850, with its 4-cylinder engine, unlike the 500, which had a twin-cylinder air-cooled engine. Have a look on the start line if you're here. We'll focus on it on screen very shortly, but Ed Burgess comes to the start line in his glorious Type 51. He's not very happy because this morning in practice it was only running on 7 of its 8 cylinders. Sounds okay. They're very quick cars, the Type 51. As of course was the Bugatti Type 35B, and Ed has had this car comprehensively rebuilt throughout the winter, and so it's suffering a few teething troubles, but sounds to me as if it's going fine. As opposed to Tim Dutton's red and black one, which has just left the line, which sounded to me as if it was only on 6 of its 8 cylinders. Here it comes. Interesting paint scheme for a Bugatti to have a red radiator, but this one colour scheme follows a famous pre-war car. Ed Burgess heads for the finish and does so in 53.05. I don't think Tim will be anywhere near as quick as that because the engine certainly isn't on full song. So Tim heading for semicircle. We keep an eye on his time, but in the meantime William Balfour in a Type 35B Bugatti that isn't in the programme. This car is for sale. If you're looking for a Bugatti Type 35B, talk nicely to Tim Dutton, who's here in the red and black one. Get your checkbook out, and for a great deal of money you could buy this lovely Type 35B. It hasn't been over-restored, it's not in Concours condition, but looks like a nice original car. Time for Tim was a 54.06. He was exactly a second behind Ed Burgess. Let's see what William Balfour can do in 35B. We focus also on David Franklin, ex-HillClimb champion and a great historic racer who's having a guest drive in this lovely Porsche. Which is a car belonging to Nigel Watkins, I think, Porsche 996. And David has finished with a 53.6. Here's the famous 1913 Oakland Romano. Have you ever heard of an Oakland Romano? Well, here it is. It was an American company for a very short period before World War I, and this is the chassis of a big Oakland Romano saloon car with a Curtiss OX-5 aircraft engine out of a World War I training aircraft. And in the hands of Jack Bond, he's taken a few people up for demonstration runs. But I'm focusing on the start line as well, because on the line is David Ellison in this glorious ERA B-type toolroom copy, which David has spent 4 years building and assembling, commissioned by Roland Deuce, and Roland is determined to drive this car in European hill climb, so he'll be rushing up alpine passes in this lovely B-type ERA, just perfect copy, but uses an engine which previously was in R4D and then got pretty mangled at racing at Goodwood, and David has spent 4 years comprehensively rebuilding the engine, and it's going fine now. Switch to the start line, and here's perhaps the most famous ERA of all. Ben Fiddler having his first drive in this car. He has his own 1.5 litre ERA, AGM1, but he's got a guest drive in R4D, and he's surprised by the amount of power this car has. Massive amounts of power. Not such easy handling as the earlier ERAs with a solid front suspension. This one has got Porsche trailing arm front suspension like the pre-war Auto Unions, and Ben finds a bit of oversteer as he applies the power out of Tom Road corner. Here's an interesting car. This is a GN chassis from the early 20s, but fitted with a de Havilland Gypsy engine out of a Tiger Moth. And the interesting thing is that when it was in the Tiger Moth, it was inverted, i.e. the crankshaft was at the top and the cylinder head was at the bottom. But Tom has of course turned it the right way up and turned it round back to front, because of course in an airplane the engine drives the propeller directly, whereas in this car turn it round so that the power comes out of the back of the engine into the gearbox and final drive. We got times for Ben Fiddler and David Ellison. David in the green ERA 59.43, Ben Fiddler in R4D 53.14, and Tom Richardson in the GN has finished with a 60.12. We are offering the chance of a ride in the lightweight E-Type to winners of a raffle. If you'd like to buy a raffle ticket, you need to go quickly to the Friends of Prescott shop, which is just behind me here at the commentary, so behind the start line. So raffle to get a ride in the lightweight E-Type, call in at the Friends of Prescott, and best of luck. We're focusing on Julian Grimwade in the Norris Special, which is a Fraser Nash. Started life as an ordinary Fraser Nash TT replica, but the Norris brothers turned it into this fearsome single-seater with its 3.5 litre Alvis straight six engine out of an Alvis 25. And this car has been incredibly successful in the hands of many drivers in vintage racing, and notorious for duffing up the ERAs. Time for Julian, 52.05. Here's an unusual hill climb car. It's Peter Baker in his 2.5 litre Daimler Conquest, rather dignified saloon with a pre-selector gearbox and 2.5 litre straight six engine. And Peter has competed in this in the classic Monte Carlo Rally, finished okay, but not your natural hill climb car really. Let's see how Peter gets on. On the line is an unusual car that's not in the program, but it's a modified Jaguar. It's called the Owen Jaguar Sports, and it's a rather attractive lightweight body, probably on an XK 140 or 150 chassis, but it's elegant, isn't it? Peter in the Daimler is still trudging up the hill and getting near to the finish. Let's just focus on this very unusual shaped Jaguar Special. It's Peter Newman having a lot of fun. Peter Baker still going strong. And we were talking about Frog Eyes very shortly on the screen, and if you're here on the hill you will be seeing very attractive black Frog Eye Sprite. They were such fun. The great thing about the Frog Eye Sprite was that when you were doing 50 miles an hour, it felt like 150. Peter Baker has finished in the Daimler, 72.58. Peter Newman is nearing the finish in the Jaguar Special, 69.3. And the Frog Eye well on its way. You could never buy a new Frog Eye with wire wheels, but people like Les Leston and all the suppliers of bolt-ons for Frog Eyes very quickly realized that lots of people would like to have wire wheels on their Frog Eye Sprite. Here's Mark Ponting in the very elegant Formula Junior Cooper T59. One of the last Coopers, low line. Same year as the Type 51 that we saw being demonstrated, with which Stirling won two Grand Prix. Now, is this one slowing down? No, he's going okay still. This is Mark Ponting in his T59 Cooper. Time for Noel Hughes, 72.86. That wasn't the frog eye. Anyway, Mark Ponting. Yeah, it was Noel Hughes in the frog eye. His time was 65.12. Here is Julian Harbour in his British Leyland Mini Clubman with the slightly less aerodynamic front bodywork. And Michael Brough in his Mini is finished with a 54.76. Here's Julian Harbour. Harbouring up to the semicircle. This will be a quick run as well. 52.73, that's very good. He's followed by Ben Fisher in another Mallock, but this is the proper Clubman's version with its 1700cc pushrod Ford engine. Classic. There is still a Clubman's class, a Clubman's series on the circuits, but no longer, sadly, on the hills. They all decided to go circuit racing. Here's a well-known car in the hands of Firth Cross. This is the Ensign. Mo Nunn built 3 of these Ensigns for Formula 3, financed by Ricky Van Opel, and this one was sponsored by Dempster, which was a shipping line. And Firth has had this for, blimey, I think 12-15 years. Elegant and rapid Formula 3 car, and we'll pick up a time. Well, the time for Ben Fisher was 49.86. That's really good. 49.86. Firth Cross finishes with a 47.46, quickest time I believe so far today. And here's Alan Foster in a Morgan, the classic Morgan Plus 8, with its 3.5 litre. Although this one's got a 4 litre Rover V8, as all Plus 8s did have, of various capacities. Standard was 3.5 litres, could be bored out to 5.7, I think was the biggest ever. So he exits Tom Rote into semicircle. He's followed by Kerry Wayne in another Formula 3 car. This is the Magnum. Not many made, but fairly successful in F3 in the mid-80s. Time for Alan Foster, 55.42. Kerry Wayne's navigating the S's, and he's followed by Chris Stone in the Porsche that we saw David Franklin in just now. We'll catch that very quickly. Here he comes. Lovely Porsche in Gulf colours, traditional Gulf orange and blue. And Kerry Wayne has finished with a 47.15. Again, quickest so far today. That was in the Magnum Formula 3 car. This Porsche is a 3 litre RS, fairly early RS with the great big whale tail at the back. And successfully round semicircle, finishes with a time of 54.78. Brings us to the 500s. These are on page 15 of your program. I think this is a double driven one, so it effectively goes up a little bit earlier than the rest of them. But the 500cc Formula 3 class was immensely popular from about 1947 right through to 59 or so, and really at the instigation of the Bristol Motor Club catered for the needs of people who'd returned from the war, were used to driving things, wanted to compete but couldn't afford to because, you know, ERAs and things were more expensive than a house. But they started producing these little Jap or Norton engine specials, and very soon Cooper, John and Charles Cooper, built their own and saw it as a great opportunity to go into production with Formula 3 500cc Coopers, and they dominated for a long time. There was a period when Kiefts came along and threatened the Cooper domination, but Formula 3 500s spawned all sorts of little specials. Here's an example, the Hornet in the hands of Alistair Dent. This is an early one from 1948. Time for Vic Dean in his green one, 57.89. Let's see what Alistair can do in the Hornet. Dent family have been campaigning 500cc Formula 3 cars for a long time. The Hornet is a very rare one, and quite a quick one, 55.53. But on the line is a very unusual car, Tim Densham in the unique WHD, which has got front engine and front wheel drive. So it's got chains running from the engine forward to a differential on the front axle. And it's surprisingly effective. Although I don't remember it having much of a race history in period. It's blowing lots of lovely smoke out of the exhaust pipe. And the WHD is still going strong, followed by another rare Formula 500 car, the Iota. And I can tell you who's won the ride in the E-Type. It's pink ticket number 302. So, congratulations. And if you've got 302 pink, you've got 10 minutes to claim your prize and have a ride in the lovely E-Type Jaguar. Terrific. Thanks for offering it. It's a treat for somebody. We got a red flag. Now, why have we got a red flag? We did have very briefly. I'm not sure why, but luckily the action on the track is still going strong, with Michael Wood in the Iota heading for semicircle. And pretty soon you'll see the classic Mark V Cooper on the line in the hands of Andy Raynor. Time for the Iota, 58.91. Time for Tim Densham in the front-engined WHD, 61.21. The explanation of why we got a red flag was somebody just dislodged a bit of the gravel, and it's only fair to the following competitors if it then gets swept away. So thank you, marshals. We focus again on the Mark V Cooper. Not sure if it's a Norton engine or a Jap engine. Norton's famous Norton engine tended to be more powerful than the Jap, but heavier. And so very often someone would have a Jap engine for hill climbing and a Norton engine for circuit racing. But here is Andy Raynor on the line in his Mark V, and the Mark V from 1951. I used to bicycle from school to Brands Hatch to watch these guys racing, and the racing was always fast and furious. And indeed, there is a class in historic racing for these 500s, and lots of them, particularly for the 500cc race at Goodwood, every fourth Goodwood revival for the Chichester Cup, attracts lots of these little cars, and they have a terrific race. Andy Rayner heads for Pardon, turns in nice and tight. And on the line is one of the quickest of the 500s. We'll see it in a few seconds. Here it is. It's Mark Riley in the Creamer Special. He's a very quick driver. It's a quick car. Has intriguing rear suspension using bungee cords rather than leaf or coil springs. With lots of very eccentric engineering in a lot of these 500cc F3 cars, and Mark's was one of the most effective of them. Andy Rayner has finished with a 57.72 in the silver Mark V Cooper. We're watching Mark Riley. If you were watching here last weekend, was it last weekend? When we celebrated the life of, I'll come back to it. In the meantime, we're watching Jan Nietz in the Star Ride, built in London by Mr. Erskine. They were called Erskine Star Ride, with its very front located driving position. So if it started to slide and spin, you had to catch it very quick. Mark Riley's gone up in a 54.23, which looks to me like the quickest of this class. But let's see what Jan can do in his always immaculate Star Ride. This got the Norton engine. Jan in the Star Ride 56.7. He's followed by John Dent in a younger Cooper, the Mark 8 from 1954. And he's nearing the finish. He's going around semicircle now. And we focus on John Finlay McIntosh in his Cooper, which is a Mark 11. The last, I think the Mark 11 was the last of the 500cc Coopers before Cooper went on to Formula Junior with a BMC 1 litre engine. Slides it nicely out of the S's and hugs the inside curb and up to the finish to record a good time of 54.19. Here's Richard Robarts, who had a short Formula 1 career for Brabham until Bernie Ecclestone chucked him out, presumably because he couldn't come up with enough money to pay for the drive. But he then had a drive in the Swedish Grand Prix, but unfortunately the other team car got crashed in practice, and the driver, who was a well-known Formula 1 driver, heaved Richard out of the car, and he didn't ever get that drive. So here's Charles Reynolds in the Mark 7, but this one with the twin-cylinder 1100cc Jap engine, the car to have if you were competing in the British HillClimb Championship in the late 50s, and the likes of Ken Wharton, David Good drove them with great effect. Charles's quickest time, but because he's got 1100cc under his belt, was 52.98. Here's Fraser Dean, who is sharing the Mark 9 with Vic Dean. I think this is a father and son combo, and it's an immaculate Mark 9 Cooper from 1955. And he brings up the end of our Formula 3 500cc class. And great fun they are too. Vic did a 57.89. What can Fraser do? He does a 56.17, so he scoops the pool, the family pool so far. But remember, these are the first runs, and we've got second runs to come. Brings us to the Austin Healeys. Competing in the Healey Sport Championship, led away by the Sprite of Maxwell Shand. Ooh, a late entry, and just skirts the cones at the S's, but no harm done, and now swoops it through semicircle, heads for the finish, to be followed by Michael Berry in the Austin Healey 100M. Interesting car. The Austin Healey 100 was the first of the Austin Healey brand with its four-cylinder engine, and they made a few 100Ms with more power, and it was either X Works with the 100M or the modifications were done by the dealer when the car was delivered. But it gave you a bit more power, and he's followed by John Ducker in a 2.6 litre four-cylinder left-hand drive Austin Healey 100, which reminds us how many of these were sold in the States. We've got a time for Michael Berry in the 100M 55.77, and John Ducker is heading for the finishing line, and he's followed by Claire Jars in the first of our six-cylinder Austin Healeys. John Ducker has finished with a 58.53. Claire Jars into and through the S's quite safely in her early six-cylinder version, which was always called the 106. She finishes with a time of, it's clicking up, 59.9. Here's Steve Casson in the Sebring version of the Austin Healey Sprite, reminding us that BMC entered a team of Sprites for the 3-hour race at Sebring in Florida that preceded the famous 12-hour big sports car race. And they gradually got more and more pretty, and Stirling Moss indeed drove a Sebring Sprite 1 year for the BMC. Here's Robert Owen in the 1959 Frog Eye. Immaculate, lovely car. They do look nice on wire wheels, although they never had them as standard. It was quite an expensive option, well, not an option, quite an expensive add-on that you bought from Les Leston and people like that. Interesting in this championship that often the quickest car in this class can be a Sprite or a midget, despite the competition from the 3-litre versions. We got a time for Robert Owen in the Sprite 56.36. This is Trish Cecile Pritchard in her 1959 Austin Healey 106. And she is followed by Lawrence Maudsley in an early Sprite with a much modified bodywork, very reminiscent of the Sebring Sprite. Trish finished with a 60.55. Let's keep an eye on Lawrence Maudsley in his Sprite, and also follow Peter Walton in his 3-litre Austin Healey, Big Healey from 1960. And you'll remember how successful these big Healeys were in European rallies, driven by, amongst others, Pat Moss, Stirling's sister, and they were tough old things. The Liège-Rome-Liège rally was an absolute car breaker, but Pat Moss and Ann Wisdom were were two of the very few people to get a Coupe des Alpes, an Alpine Cup for the Liège-Rome-Liège. And one of the problems was the exhaust exited just behind the passenger door and fried the feet of the co-driver. Here is Richard Mason in a Mark II Austin PB 3000. Richard Hinton in his Sprite is nearly at the finish, but we're just focusing the camera on this lovely 3-litre Mark II Austin Healey. Time for Richard Hinton, 69.54 in the Sprite. Ian Thomas rounding semicircle, and Edward Giles on the start line. Here's Ian Thomas. It wasn't semicircle, it was Torres. They often had this white fixed removable hardtop with the minivan extractor lid on the top, so you didn't fry completely, only you got half fried in it. Time for Richard Mason, number 110 in the Mark II, was a 51.94. So quickest so far that I can see is Michael Berry with the 100M with an amazing time of 55.77. Maxwell Shand actually was quicker in his 3000 Mark III with a 53.96. I guess there's a handicap system of some sort, but I couldn't possibly explain it. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Peter Hughes, and he will complete the first runs, and also the motorbikes are coming. So over to Peter.
Well, thanks very much to Chris for the last hour of commentary, and as I say, we are in the midst of the Healey Championship runners, Healey Sport Series runners on the hill. At the moment, we've got the Healey on. Well, we got the Jensen Healey. In fact, that was 30.2 litre. Paul Baker just head from Vittori's to Pardon. Just a little bit of smoke, slightly lock of the brakes as he goes around Pardon, but successfully negotiates the left-hand hairpin. Time incidentally for Robert Shand in Car 115 was a 59.49. Very wide on the exit to put the S's there. Paul Baker in that Jensen Healey. But still carries on his way. The Austin Healey Sprite, now Mark 5 of Garrow Shand, car number 800. Successfully negotiating the Torres and heading on up towards Pardon. Through there, keeps it nice and tight on the inside there, and on towards the S's. Little Sprite going well at the moment. Paul Baker's time incidentally was a 51.86. As we see Peter Smith in the Reliant Scimitar SS1 from 1986, the 1800cc machine, on his way around Pardon. Gareth Shand records a 57.65. Peter Smith continuing on up towards the S's, and then it'll be into semicircle and then on to the finish of the hill. The Japanese interloper, the Mazda MX-5 from 1991, the car of Charlie Delahanty, takes on Pardon. It's quite a challenging hairpin, that one. It's one where we occasionally get some offs. We had one this morning, of course, with one of Sprites going off there. Peter Smith's time was a 62.67. We wait for Charlie Delahanty to complete his run in the MX-5. He goes, yes, we see the MGB Roadster, Robert Orford, pardon. And 63.09 then for the Mazda MX-5 of Charlie Delahanty. As through the S's comes that MGB Roadster, and looks like it's pushing pretty hard, a little bit wide on the exit of that left-hander, but nothing to worry about. It's up to semicircle, on round there and on towards the finish line, and over the line for 52.32. Meanwhile, the first of our TVR Vixens is the car of Jeffrey Stallard, car number 123. He's in the S's at the moment. Of the S's, as we see Steve Thomas in his TVR Vixen, and Jeffrey Stallard records a time of 53.18. Meanwhile, Steve Thomas there going around the Torres. Corner that seems to go on, then run up the hill to Pardon into the left-hander. There's a clean line around there, on up towards the S's, the S's. And it's on to semicircle. Lovely section of track there through the trees. And the third of the Vixens is Stuart Lobley in the yellow car 125, with Steve Thomas records a 53.67. Stewart is around the Torres, and that's sure to drag up to Pardon. Quite a lock up there going into the left-hander, but cleanly around the corner. He goes. He's fiberglass bodied cars built in Blackpool. Now we see Alan Voice in the Triumph GT6, the 2-litre 6-cylinder engine from 1973. Stuart Lobley's time then at 55.14, as you may be able to see on screen. The GT6 then around Pardon. Through the S's comes that car from 1973, so very nearly 50 years old now, the Triumph. Benningfield in the slightly younger MG Midget 1500 goes around the Torres, car 127. As Alan Voice records a 57.84. Ian Benningfield with a lock-up going into Pardon, but successfully negotiates the corner. Comes on then to the S's in that white midget 1500cc engine from 1977. And we see the green midget Jamie Fisher Pearson car 128 as he negotiates the Tories and on up to Pardon. Time about to be registered, Ian Banningfield at 58.90. Jamie Fisher Pearson just over halfway up the hill now. A little bit wide there on the exit of that left-hander, but nothing to worry about for Jamie as he comes around semi-circle. Meanwhile, we switch to Nigel Walton in his Triumph Spitfire, the same year as the MG Midget. 54.82 by the way, the Midget. Nigel Walton then around Pardon. Spitfire, which had a reputation that the rear axle setup made the handling a little unpredictable at times, but you could sort it out. to Escort from 1979, the car of Graham Miller. As Nigel Walton records a 59.69 in the Triumph Spitfire. The Escort just hanging the tail out a touch, not quite as much as you might expect to see it if it were on a rally, of course, but he goes up to the finish line, and it's a 50.14 for Graham Miller. As we come back to the Fiat X19 1.4 litre engine of Jonathan Plough, Abarth equipped car. Very much a competition car, this X19 of Jonathan's. Using all the road there, the S's. And then the race-bred TVR Tuscan of Rob Pack, 4.6 litre V8 engine. 53.45 Jonathan Plough's time man to negotiate the hill. It's the first run for everybody, of course. They will get a second run. Pack continues on up in the Tuscan. As we switch to Noah Ali in the Mazda MX-5 from 1992. Time for Rob Pack in that TVR, 51.45 seconds. Ali in the silver coloured Japanese sports car with black roof. And we see the Alfa Romeo 75 of Paul Holmes, 2 litre engine once again in the Alfa Romeo. The time for Noah Ali is a 53.96. Paul Holmes continues his way on up the hill in that Italian saloon. It's Italian saloons here last weekend, of course, at Prescott Italia. Very British car now, the TVR Griffith 500, 5 litres of V8 power under the bonnet for Peter Ash in that yellow machine. Paul Holmes' time incidentally 58.81 in the Alfa 75. Ash continues on through the twisty section of the hill. And then on towards semicircle. Under the bridge comes Josh Klimo in the Reliant Scimitar SS1. Peter Ash does a 57.62 in the TVR Griffith 500. Josh Klimo then going around the Torres. Up to Harden. Behind Josh comes the Mazda MX-5 of Andy Johnson, car from 1991. So waiting for Josh Klimo to stop the clock, which he does at 64.14. You see the silver Janetta G4 of Matthew Eady, which was originally built in 1997. Now 25 years old. Andy Johnson's time in the MX-5 is a 61.04. G4 Janetta continues its way up the hill in the hands of Matthew Eady. TVR Griffith 5 litre car of Stephen Mogg. He goes around 50.06, a good time then for the Janetta G4. TVR Griffith continuing its way up the hill, and behind that it is the Mazda MX-5 of M. Ali, car 139. As the TVR Griffith stops the clock at 48.84 seconds. And Emma Ali continuing her way on up to Pardon. the S's. Then comes Emma. Watkins there, the 996 model Porsche with a 3.4 litre engine, clocking 66 miles an hour at the bridge. Ali does a 57.34, so a very respectable time for 1600 Mazda MX-5. And we see an 1840cc Mazda MX-5, that the car of Howard Barnett, number 142. So he goes around Pardon. Nigel Watkins' time was 52.09. And to wend his way up the hill in the little MX-5. And then we see the Honda S2000. So we see the Porsche 986S of John Austin. 2002. The time for the MX-5 was a 52.54 seconds. Austin continues his way up the hill then in the Porsche. And now we see the Honda S2000 as the car of Phil Ludbrook, number 144. As the clock stops for John Austin, the Porsche at a time of 55.54 seconds. Phil Ludbrook is through Pardon. Continuing on up the hill. Not nearly as many of these sold as the Honda MX-5, but a lovely car indeed, the S2000. Very powerful, a lot of power got out of that 2-litre engine by Honda. And the Ginetta, this time the G20 GT4 Coupe of Colin Seaward with the 1.7-litre engine on it. For Ludbrook's time in the Honda S2000, 53.31 seconds. As Colin Seaward goes around Pardon. Towards us as he comes through the S's here in the top of the Prescott Hill. Into semicircle as the 2021 Porsche Boxster 4-litre of Steve Lyle, car 146, looking very quick out of the Torres. 59.11 is the time for Colin Seaward in the Ginetta. What can the Boxster do? He can hang the tail out a long way to the left-hander of the S's, but holds on to the car, comes up to semicircle, and he's really pushing Steve while in this Boxster. He goes over the line, 48.48 seconds, as we turn our attention to two-wheel machinery, because on the line at the moment it is Harvey Mills on his 250cc Ariel. Waiting to get the green light. The revs rise and away he goes. In the smallest engine class in this series. Aerial around the Torres. Runs up to Pardon. And that left-hand leg goes the Aerial. Melsan brings it on up the hill. We pick up the Honda, 250cc Honda of Keith Ruddock, bike 248. Harvey Mills manages to stop the clock on the Aerial at 55.94 seconds. Paddock then goes around Pardon and away. Not going too far over with the lean angles on the older Honda. Understandable. And we pick up the 350cc Ducati of Doug Parnell as he comes around Pardon. And the clock stops for Keith Ruddock at 62.99 seconds. We move up to the next category with Doug Parnell here on the Ducati, the up to 500cc class. The yellow machine is the Yamaha RD350 of Simon Wilson. Admired model, the RD Yamahas. 56.97 is Doug Parnell's time on the Ducati. As Simon Wilson comes around, pardon. Heads away from us, then we switch camera and coming towards us through midway at 35.19 and now into the S's, and there's a 40.48 as far as the S's, and we get one more interval time, 47.53 for semi-in. There's Christopher Ewins on his 350 Suzuki. 55.49 the time for Simon Wilson on the Yamaha. As Chris Ewins comes out of Pardon on up towards midway. Midway, it'll be on to the S's. And we see the Velocet 390s, so that's another class. Again, John Bottomley, like 507 on the Velocet. The time for Christopher Ewins on the 350 Suzuki is 73.88. So the Velocet heads away from Pardon. John Bottomley at the handlebars. Sedately than some of the bikes through that twisty section of the S's, but the bike much older than some of the other bikes. Around Pardon now goes Steve Atkins on his 403cc Greaves. You get a time of 70.91 for John Bottomley on the Velocet. Steve Atkins continues his way up the hill. And behind Steve Atkins it is kart bike 541 Aidan Stafford on the Honda CRF 450. As he goes around Pardon, Steve Atkins crosses the finish line in a time of 59.17 seconds. Aidan Stafford then went up towards the finish line on the Honda CRF 450. Semicircle, comes on towards the finish line and crosses the line in 57 seconds exactly. Meanwhile, going around Pardon is Kirsty Glover on the Velocet 350. Mike Wade has left the start line on the aerial jump 500. It's Kirsty Glover that we pay attention to at the moment, coming up to the S's. A time I suspect that will threaten the top positions. Mike Wade wins his aerial jump 500 around Pardon. Steve Glover does a time of 73.54 seconds. Mike Davis continues then on the aerial 540 bike. Reg Davis goes around Vittori's on his KTM. As Mike Wade stops the clock at 68.41 seconds. So he's coming up to the S's now. See Richard Peaty, bike 553 on the Husqvarna. Around Well, Reg Davis's time B is a 59.91, so just getting under the minute mark there, Reg Davis on the KTM. As Richard Peaty continues on the Husqvarna. And we see Nigel Glover on this Ducati 750. Ducati frame, which PTB well registered 52.72 on the Espana. And Nigel Glover then continuing up the hill. Bike which unfortunately we have no details other than it is the 736 bike, and from memory I believe it's a Yamaha. Nigel Glover's time on the Ducati 750 was 57.13. So the mystery rider now is the next rider to cross the finish line, comes up towards semicircle and up to the finish line and does a 52.51. So he switched to Dick Sinkins, like 739 on the Honda XBR 600cc machine. He comes up through midway and towards the S's. It is Dick Sinkins heading towards semicircle, all the way through semicircle and up to the finish line where he will record a time of 53.63 seconds. Rounding pardon is Neil Tamlin 718 on the Yamaha TTR 600. Very clean through there, the foot down Supermoto style as he comes around the semicircle bend up to the line and does a 58.90. Dave Peat bike number 9 is on the 800cc KTM. He's out of Tories and heading on to Pardon. Again, foot out Supermoto styles, he comes around that left-hander. And using the full width of the road as he comes through the Essex. On up towards semicircle. Out of that one right-hander, then runs to the line and does a 50.25. 50.25 for David Peat. We see Nigel Wheatley on the BSA Rocket 3 850cc machine, number 823. There is Nigel, and he comes through the S's now. As we watch Mark Stafford around Barton on the KTM D100cc machine, 60.41 the time registered for 823 Nigel Wheatley on that BSA Rocket. So now we look at Mark Stamford. He goes up towards semicircle, and we come back to Hannes Tanzer on the Harley Davidson 883. It's not a small engine, but by no means the biggest engine that Harley Davidson put in their bikes. Mark Stafford does 55.56. Tanzer comes through the S's. And then we see the lone outfit, Sidecar outfit here today. That's Mark and James Foster in their 1070cc Foster BMW. Hannes Tanzer has done a 58.22 seconds. Meanwhile, it's the last then of our first motorbike run, so I'll get a second run and runoff later in the afternoon. We'll be switching back to four-wheel action with cars, and Mark and James Foster are heading up through the S's, and then it'll be the really lengthy right-hander through the semicircle to the finish line. Runs very wide there on the exit of the last part of the S's. Will cost some time, I think. Continue on up through semicircle up to the finish line, and their time is 70.50, 70.50, the time for Martin James Foster, and that actually completes our first run for the motorbikes. First timed run, of course, running the National Hill Climb Association series, and in just a few moments I'm sure we'll be switching back to the cars.
Attention Paddock, we all the drivers in the Fassi classes M1 and 2, P3 and P4, go to your cars and await the marshal's instructions for your second timed run. That's Fassi classes 1 and 2, P3 and P4. Thank you.
Well, before we get the timed runs back underway, we have our prize winners run in this lightweight E-Type, the car that was raced both by Sir Stirling Moss and Win Percy, and away it goes up the hill. Not pushing too hard then through under the bridge. This, as I say, the prize runners run. That raffle has raised something in excess of £250 for the friends of Prescott. All that money going towards the upkeep of the hill. And a big thank you to everyone who bought prizes, and to the car owner for providing this prize run, and of course to all the friends of Prescott, the voluntary supporters who help keep this hill climb going. So thanks to everybody involved. Well, as the prize winners run is heading towards a conclusion, we see the first car on the line preparing for its second time run. It's the number 61 machine, the Mallock Mark IV U2 1600cc engine from 1964, the car of Peter Thurston, that sits on the start line at the moment. So away goes the Mallock then. And Mark IV U2, as I say, Mallock's idea that provided motor racing action for so many people over the years, and still continues to do so. Torres on up to park, looking very clean so far. So it goes around the left-hander and arm up through midway towards the S's. Through the S's end goes Peter Thurston, wide on the exit, but keeps it all on the black stuff. Then into the right-hander at semicircles. Around the right-hander at Torres comes Mike White in his 1967 MG Special. He runs on up towards Pardon, and the time for Peter Thurston, a very impressive 46.45 seconds in that Mallock U2. So we see Mike White once again in this MG Special, built in 1967, 1950cc engine, power in it, front engined single seater of course. And then the blue and yellow Ukrainian coloured Mallock U2 Mark 6B of Christopher Wigdor, as Mike White's time comes up as 61.04. And behind Christopher Wigdor it is the Mark IV Nike of Carol Nichols, a car that goes back to 1968. 51.38 seconds for Christopher Victor. Here's Mallock U2. As off the line comes the 1962 Austin A40 Farina of John Louch, car number 70. Not a type of car that had a huge motorsport history back in the day. But, a number of people campaigning these days in the various historic categories. 56.19 then, time for Carol Nichols in Nike. As John Louch rounds pardon in the Austin A40. Through midway up to the S's. The little saloon car, and then on towards semicircle. Behind John is Lee Carter in this Fiat 695 SS Abarth from 1969. 58.86 second time recorded for John Louch as the Abarth goes around pardon. Engine cover propped open, as is commonplace on these little Fiats, as it is on this 1972 Fiat Abarth 850 as well. 64.44 seconds time for Lee Carter. So this 850 Fiat Abarth still on its way up the hill. And the second part of the S's and on to semicircle it goes. Then we see Martin Saunders around the pardon in this immaculate looking Mark I Escort from 1970. As Peter Hall stops the clock in the Fiat Abarth at 66.78 seconds. The Escort really pushing hard by the looks of it. We see Ian Stringer in the 1964 Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GT 2-litre machine. And Martin Saunders in the Mark I Escort records a time of 52.47 seconds. Ian Stringer, meanwhile, in the Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GT is around pardon, heading on up the hill into the S's now. The Italian car, and then we see the hard charging Hillman Imp locking up, going into Ettores and getting a little bit out of shape, and a bit threatening bit around Ettores. That will cost him a little bit of time, I think, on this climb. Ian Stringer meanwhile did 54.54 in the Alpha, but the Hillman still on its way. The little Hillman Imp rear engine still on its way, despite one or two moments on the way up the hill. Still charging hard, going up towards semicircle. As we switch back to the other small saloon of the same era, and this one of course the Austin Mini, the 1460cc engine powering this car for Matt Clark, while Mark Maynard did a 53 point something, I think, just lost the time off my screen as I was about to say it, in the Hillman Imp. Clipping the grass on the inside of that left-hander there, Matt Clark in the Mini. This car now some, 62 years old, just a couple of years younger, or 4 years younger to be precise, is the 105E Anglia of Dave Palm with the 1700 engine powering it. The 105E Anglia replaced the 100E Anglia, but they didn't stop making the 100E, they renamed it the Ford Poplar, carried on making the two cars side by side in fact for a little while. But this is perhaps the car we tend to think of when we talk about Anglias, because of its distinctive body, Americanized body styling with that interesting angle on the back window. He rounds a semicircle, heads towards the line, and the time is going to be 57.26 seconds. And then we continue our attention to Andy Clark, number 79, this 1961. This Mini with an engine now of 1430 cc's, clearly been modified over the years. Andy Clark then goes through the S's, and then it prepares for semicircle. We see the Mark II Escort of Mark Hobbs from 1976. That red colouring reminded me just a little bit of Roger Clark's Cossack sponsored Escort back in the day. 55.96 incidentally the time for the previous car, for the Mini. Mark Hobbs continuing on his way though, just clipping the inside curve there through the S's, hangs the tail out a little bit coming out of the last section of the S's, continues on his way up to semicircle, safely rounds that corner, goes under the finish banner, and does a time of 51.36. Gary Cox meanwhile in the Reliant Scimitar GTE 3-litre machine from 1971 is just rounding a pardon. Continues his way up. Hanging the tail out a little bit there through the last part of the S's. We look at the A35 Austin of Brian Ashley from 1958. This is a car that, well, in its day, and also more recently in historic rallying, has a reputation of being something of a giant killer. 53.33 for Gary Cox in the Scimitar. But yeah, the Austin A35 has taken on in the British Saloon Car Championship of its era. It would take on Jags and some of the big American cars that were used in the championship at that time, and on occasions beat them as well. But he is now going into semicircle as we wait to pick up Terry Clifford. There he is in the Alfa Romeo GT Junior 2-litre machine. Brian Ashley's time in the A35 is 56.17 seconds. There's Terry Clifford in the Alfa Romeo GT. He rounds pardon. And anyway, onto the S's. Looked a fairly clean run up to now. As he comes into semicircle. And we see a big lock-up into pardon for the Austin A40 Farina of Steve Louch, but despite that lock-up he manages to get turned in and negotiate pardon with a time of 54.86 for the previous car. Steve Louch continuing on his way. He's through the S's and on to semicircle. Around there and makes the run for the line and does a time of 54.65. And David Fripp is just rounding Torres in the 695 SS Abarth Fiat. And he also gets around pardon. These diminutive looking cars were quite something in their day in terms of performance and handling. And just a touch wide maybe on the exit there of the last part of the S's, David Fripp in the Fiat, but he carries on his way, and we pick up the MG Midget of Tim Cross, car number 1970, 1400cc engine. Tim sharing this car across today. So you may possibly hear the throaty roar of the V8 engine in the MGB GT of Charles Bolton, we'll see in just a moment. We continue to focus for the time being on the MG midget, is now heading for semicircle. And we see going into Pardon the V8 MGB GT 3.5 litre engine of Charles Bolton. Interestingly, they did put some V8 into some MGBs, but then when they built the MGC, which succeeded it, they put the straight 6 3 litre engine out of the Austin Healey 3000 and the Austin Westminster into that, and built very few of those. But before the MGB, surprise surprise, it was the MGA, and that's what we're looking at now. Ted Elwes in the 1960 MGA heading up the hill. This, meanwhile, is Stephen Akers in his 1964 Lotus Elan S1. Ted Elwes in the MGA doing a time of 56.43. We follow now the Elan through the S's. Oh, we're getting it very out of shape in the last part of the S's, but manages to get it back and continues on up to semicircle. We see Doug Chipperfield, car number 94, in his Mark III MG midget, and Stephen Akers' time of 55.40, despite that drama. Now, well, my screen freezes for the moment, but I did wonder if Doug Chipperfield was slowing on the hill. It doesn't look to be running at any great pace, to be honest, as he comes through the S's now. Not sure whether he might have a problem in that MG midget. We see Les Buck in the green S4 Lotus Elan fixed head coupe around Pardon, and the time for Doug Chipperfield is 69.20 seconds. Les Buck meanwhile coming through the S's and on up towards semicircle. And we see roof down Keith Wilson in the 1963 Mark I MG midget 1400cc. Les Buck's time in the Elan of 57.53. Keith Wilson continues on up in the MG midget through the S's and then up to semicircle. Meanwhile, Terence Cox is into Pardon in his Reliant Scimitar car coupe. That's the, as I said earlier, the slightly less common booted version rather than the hatchback type Scimitar that we perhaps most associate. 55.67 though for the previous car, but Reliant Scimitar coupe of Terence Cox continuing on up through the S's, and we see the 1929 MGM type of Frank Ashley, just 850 cc's powering it up the hill as Terence Cox stops the clock at 58.09. Frank Ashley runs up to Pardon in that beautiful looking MG, now over 90 years old, that car of course, but still going strong. And we see just 1 year younger, the Austin Ulster 750cc car of Joe Tisdall. As the time for Frank Ashley comes in at 60, well, it's still running in fact, the clock. 73.14 in the end for Frank Ashley. Joe Tisdall continues his way up the hill in the Austin Ulster, and around Torres comes the J2 MG from 1933, the car of Stephen Rees, once again 847 cc's. As Joe Tisdall stops the clock at 72.59 seconds. And we see the Rapid Riley Special 1500cc machine from 1935 of Christopher Tabor, putting in some good times in practice, certainly. And he heads up towards Pardon. And that left-hand bend he goes. And the time meanwhile for Stephen Rees in the MG J2 is 77 seconds exactly. It's Tabor though through the S's now and heading out towards semicircle. And this, I think, is going to be a significantly quicker time than the older sports cars that have already gone through. He goes under the finish line with a 61.89. And Ben Cross now in the 1970 MG Midget 1400cc machine on 1970, as I say. Ben around Pardon. Lifting a front wheel, the inside front wheel, just a little bit through the S's there. And this looks like it could be quite a good time then for the MG Midget as he comes around semicircle and towards the line under the finish barrier in 56.19 seconds as we see something just a little bit special. The Type 51 Bugatti of Tim Dutton, car from 1931, and Tim certainly knows how to pedal this car. Isn't sparing the horses at all as he comes around a Torres. Very fittingly a Bugatti going around a Torres up to Pardon. And from Pardon on up through Midway and towards the S's in this wonderful single-seater car. And the S's on up to semicircle, then goes Tim Dutton in that Type 51, and then the run to the finish line. And it's a 53.51 from Tim Dutton as we see William Balfour in the Type 35B, slightly older car from 1929, William, and he is on his way up to Pardon. Around the tight left-hander he goes then in that Bugatti. Through Midway onto the S's. Just hanging the tail out ever so slightly through the S's. Goes up towards semicircle. As we see the second of our Type 51s, Edmund Burgess, in a car from 1932. A 63.39 seconds run for William Balfour. Edmund Burgess looking very rapid through a Torres there, on up now to Pardon. This looks so far like quite an impressive run in this beautiful Bugatti as he goes through Midway and onto the S's. And just clipping a pole, I think, on the inside of that part of the S's, but they are meant to sort of bend out of the way, so no harm done. Around semicircle to the line for a 53.52 second run as we switch to Hill Climb race David Franklin in the 3-litre RS Porsche from 1972, one of the ultimate Porsche 911s. This wonderful car and its Gulf livery. And David Franklin then on up to Pardon. Knows this hill, as I said before, knows it oh so well, and putting that knowledge to good use as he comes through Midway onto the S's. And this looks like a pretty rapid run as we see Jack Bond in that 1913 Oakland Romano. And the time for David Franklin, meanwhile, of 53.44 seconds. As this 109-year-old car of Jack Bond comes into Ettore. Huge steering wheel all the way up and continues on up. It's a courageous drive by Jack Bond in this amazing car, which goes around Pardon now. And, a little bit close to the grass there. Through midway, through the S's then comes the American machine. Running very, very wide on the exit, not quite getting onto the grass on the exit of the last part of the S's. Goes into semicircle and drifts the car around that long right-hander. Goes under the line to do a very, very creditable 65.90 seconds as we turn to an archetypal British racing car. It is the D-Type ERA from 1938 of Ben Fidler that sits on the line at the moment. Quite sure what the delay is, but just a little bit of a delay before we see the ERA start its climb. The revs rise and away goes then, that ERA D-Type in the hands of Ben Fidler up towards the bridge. Haze of smoke from the exhaust as he comes around the left-hander that brings him up to Ettore's. 61 miles an hour underneath the bridge for this 85-year-old car. On up to Pardon. Through midway he goes on through the S's. This looks like a very good run. Oh, just again a little bit twitchy there out of the S's and into semicircle, and again just hanging the tail out a little bit through there, but under the banner, and stops the clock at 52.47 seconds. We see the 1925 Gypsy GN Special of Tom Richardson, car number 42, going into Pardon now. With a 5.7 litre engine. Continues his way up the hill. Around semicircle he goes onto the finish line for a time of 60.08. Coming out and just clipping the just getting a bit out of line. In fact, clips the gravel on the exit to Ettore's and almost gets onto the grass on that sort of triangle on the run up to Pardon. That's David Saxel in the 1934 Riley TT Sprite, and I think we are going to have a red flag once his run is completed to sweep up that gravel. He comes through the S's and on up to semicircle. Turquoise Riley TT Sprite 1500 from 1934 goes over the finish line in a time of 68.18 seconds, and I will as we have the red flag out now, I'll take this moment to hand back to Chris for the next group of cars going up the hill.
We've got three ambassadors at Prescott today, believe it or not. We've got Dom Kibea from the repair shop. We've got Sarah Crabtree, who you would have seen in the past on Mathewson's amazing auction site. And we've got Mark Allam, who you often see on Antiques Roadshow. All these programs I watch diligently. We've got 3 ambassadors at Prescott today, believe it or not. We've got Dom Kimea from the repair shop. We've got Sarah Crabtree, who you would have seen in the past on Mathewson's amazing auction site, and we've got Mark Allam, who you often see on Antiques Roadshow. All these programs I watch diligently.
Glad to hear it.
Which is your favourite?
Yours is definitely.
I knew he'd be a bit biased.
Tell me, guys, about the Association of Heritage Engineers. What's it all about?
I think
Dom.
that's the reason why we're all here, we're ambassadors of it. I think for myself, I enjoy inspiring kids and people to get into making stuff like this.
Yes.
And anything we can do really to sort of showcase the amazing people that build these cars and to encourage people to get into getting an apprenticeship. You can, there's other options. You don't have to go through this school and university route. There are other options out there for a career in doing something like this.
And the great thing, Sarah, is to encourage manufacturers to make things that can be mended rather than just have to be chucked away.
Absolutely, make everything sustainable, yeah.
Exactly. Because it's awful having, I've got so many bits of kit that I don't use and they just go in the bin. Not good.
That's a real shame, yeah.
But your career has taken off since you leaving Mathewson's.
It certainly has, yeah, which is a little bit strange. But yeah, so that's really good. And it's great that I've been able to stay within the industry, within the auction industry, within the classic industry, and to be able to use my profile really to encourage not just youngsters, but also hopefully other females into the industry, because there's not enough females.
But what you're doing is an online auction house.
That's right, yeah. So I'm running an online auction house, Evoke Classics. It's fantastic, I'm having a great time, and then on my days off I get to come to places like this.
I know.
Wow, what a life. Come on.
But are you doing a lot for the association?
Yes, I try to do as much as possible. I speak to people on a weekly basis. People contact me, they'll email me. I get girls emailing me saying, I'm really wanting to do this. Is there any way that you know how I can get into that? I want to be a mechanic, I want to do this, I want to learn how to do retrimming, and how can I do that? Do you know anybody that I can contact? So that's great that girls and youngsters are coming to me and asking me for advice.
And I was going to say, butting in there, that's massively inspirational. If you go up to the workshops at Brooklands, for instance, you'll see that, I was up there recently, that literally 50% of the apprentices were girls.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was, incredible to see that. And I think you two have nailed it. Sustainable, basically, transferable skills, talking to youngsters. 20-year-old driving that machine behind us. I am more than old enough to be his father, and I am going to be putting my trust in him later to take me up that hill. And I'm not in the slightest bit worried about it.
Take out special insurance, you'll be all right.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
Sign that disclaimer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But Mark, your other life is about collecting funny things.
Yeah, it's funny because, in a way people think, Antiques Roadshow, he deals in antiques, but I'm what they call a miscellaneous specialist. So, I go across the board really, jack of all trades, master of none, but my personal interests are mechanical things, cars. I have a few old cars. I love guitars. I like making things, repairing things. And so lots of those skills are very transferable. Art crosses over with design. And you only have to go into the Bugatti Museum here and look at the history of the Bugatti family and look at the way everything from the mascot on the front to the dial inside crosses all of those kind of those skills.
And how art was connected with engineering, because it was a very artistic family.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that people forget really. You can be a scientist and you can be an artist. And we encourage all of those things with AOHE, that skill set which crosses all of those bridges.
What I've always wondered about Antiques Roadshow, do all of you turn up just in case something appropriate comes along, along, and half the time you're not needed? Or do they choose the things to look at according to the experts on hand?
Yeah, well, on any normal antiques roadshow, and it has been different over the pandemic, we have been having to invite the items in, but on any normal antiques roadshow, we'll have anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 people turn up, they queue up, and we sit there and we relentlessly work at our tables all day. So I will see hundreds of items on an antiques roadshow day, and I will pull maybe a few out. I might film 2 or 3, and really, when it comes down to it, the whole ethic of the show is spontaneity. Yeah.
I keep meaning to bring my watch, which was made in 1680, along to the Antiques Roadshow, but I can't. I'm not good at queuing.
Well, maybe I can get you a bit of a kind of a
queue jumping
pass there. Yeah, come and see me afterwards. Yeah.
Sarah, your life with Mathewson's was interesting. Did you find cameras and TV people milling around just got in the way, or did it add to the fun for you?
They sometimes did get in the way, and fortunately the crew was so fabulous that if they were getting in my way, I would just go, "Excuse me, can you just clear off?" And they would go, "Okay," and they would go.
I wish we could say that. Repair shop, yeah.
But it's different because at the end of the day they were filming me doing a job.
Yeah.
And I still had that job to do. Every 5 weeks there was an auction to run. And it could become quite stressful. And although that was quite good to capture on camera, me with steam coming out of my ears.
Jeopardy. You always need a bit of jeopardy.
Yeah, a bit of jeopardy, yeah. But all in all, the crew were fabulous, and they all remain really close friends. So
it's been a brilliant success, hasn't it? And does it continue to be, even in your absence?
I don't know.
Of course it is.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is, but I don't watch it. So I don't know.
And Dom, your speciality is metalwork.
Yeah, well, I do a lot of metalwork on the repair shop and in my own workshop for my YouTube channel, but I do other things as well, like design writing and painting. I kind of, bit of a jack of all trades as well. I kind of get involved with being at the repair shop. We don't know what's coming in next, so we quite often have to think outside the box and turn our hand to something that we're not completely, we get caught off guard quite often, so.
Well, it's a great thing you're doing. I think the sadness has been how many young people have been encouraged to go to university and learn, silly subjects, and then have difficulty getting jobs, whereas they have a much more fulfilling life if they got an apprenticeship and started making things or doing things. So well done, all of you, and many thanks, and we really hope you enjoy all these ancient vehicles at Prescott.
How can we not?
Exactly, and we'll watch with interest as you get the ride up the hill in the Romano and watch your petrified faces.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Yeah, thank you, but it's lovely to talk to you. Thanks a lot.
Have a great day.
It's a
Thanks very much indeed.
sense.
They were such fun, lovely people, and doing a great job as ambassadors for the Association of Heritage Engineers, and it's quite a move to get people realizing how satisfying it is to have a job which involves repairing things, making things, actually achieving things with your hands, and all good luck to them. They were great. A little later in the morning we had a real treat. We had a sadly fairly brief flyover by a Spitfire aeroplane from the Battle of Britain memorial flight, and on the dot of midday over came this Mark 9 Spitfire with an amazing history. It first flew in 1944 and then flew operational missions through half of 1944, got shut down, well, it got damaged a few times, had 3 wheels-up landings, after which they decided to tuck it away for a while and not bother repairing it. It then ended up as what they call a gate guardian outside an RAF station, and then was rescued and saved by the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. And here it is in this, it's often in silver natural colour, but it's presented at the moment as an airplane of 601 County of London Squadron. The Mark 9 was hurried into production when the earlier Spitfire, the Mark 5, was getting beaten up by the German Focke-Wulf 190, which was faster and more agile, and so the Mark 9 acquired a two-stage supercharger and also cannons on the wings. Previously, Spitfires had just had the 303 machine guns, which were okay, but you had to fire a lot of bullets into an airplane to damage it, whereas these cannons produced enormous amounts of firepower. So it was a very short visit, but what a lovely thing to see the Spitfire overhead Prescott. Back into action on the field, we're in the 500 class with these great Formula 3 cars from the early 50s, including this unique front-wheel drive WHD, which is being driven by Tim Densham, which has a chain drive to the front axle and front-wheel drive, as you can see. Tim said actually it would be much more effective to turn the seat round the other way around and be like a Cooper and have rear-wheel drive. And Tim has followed, having recorded a time of 59.61 by Michael Wood in another rare 500. This is the Iota. Iota made a few of these Formula 3 cars, a dozen or so. I think they were down in the West Country, but it's nice to see such an early 1951 version of the 500. So Michael Wood heads into the S's. It was a period when a lot of individuals produced special F3 cars, weird and wonderful. When we see the Creamer in the hands of Mark Riley, I'll describe its rear suspension, which is a work of art. 57.96 for Michael in the Iota. Andy Rayner in the Cooper Mark V, relatively early Cooper from 1951. First one came out in 1957. We were just watching him dislodging some of the gravel. They did tend to understeer because, of course, they didn't have differentials on the rear axle, so you either booted it in and got the tail out, or it tended to plough on in an uncontrollable understeer. So good to sweep the gravel out of the way of the competitors coming along later. Cooper soldiered on with the F3 Formula 3 500s till I think about 1959, when Formula Junior came along. Originally in Italy, with people like Stangolini producing lovely, very pretty front-engined Formula Junior cars, but then Colin Chapman at Lotus, John Cooper at Cooper got hold of the idea, realised this was the future after the demise, if you like, of Formula 3. And Chapman produced the Lotus 18 with its Ford Anglia engine. John Cooper produced the Cooper. They mostly had the BMC A-Series engine. But in the meantime, let's look at Andy Rayner taking off in the Mark V. And Formula 3 racing in this period was terrifically entertaining because they were all very similar performance. So you'd get a squadron of these things jostling for position. And remember, a number of future Grand Prix drivers cut their teeth in Formula 3, not only Stirling, of course, but Peter Collins was one, Stuart Lewis Evans, who was a Vanwall Works driver, he was another. And so it was, if you like, a nursery for drivers, but it also created, if you like, a revolution in racing car design by focusing on rear-engine cars. Up to that time, of course, pre-war and very shortly post-war, all the racing cars, with very few exceptions, had front engines. But along came Cooper and Lotus and others, and really brought the centre of focus for Grand Prix car design from Italy to the UK, and in a way we've dominated the manufacture of Formula One cars ever since then. Here's Mark Riley in the Creamer Special. Yeah, rear suspension uses bungee cords rather than coil springs or leaf springs, and if you get a chance to see this car in the paddock, do have a close look at it. It's a fascinating bit of inspired engineering. Mark is always quick, 53.79. He's followed by Jan Leach in the Mark III Star Ride, built by Mr. Erskine down in London, and for a while very successful, despite or because of its very cab-forward design. The driver right out with his legs sticking out in front of the front suspension. If you had an accident in a Star Ride, you made sure you went in backwards. And Jan's car is always immaculately prepared, has a Norton engine giving plenty of power. And you might remember that the Van Wall engine effectively was 4 Norton motorcycle cylinder heads on a Rolls-Royce block, and jolly successful it was too. Of course, as we know, it brought Van Wall great success and World Championship status. So here's John Dent in his Mark 8 from 1954. And leaving the line, we'll catch up with very soon, is Richard Roberts in his Mark 11. Here he is. He's an ex-F1 driver. He had a few drives in Formula 1 for Bernie Ecclestone, and he also had a drive, well, he was going to have a drive in the Swedish Grand Prix. I'm trying to remember which team it was for, but his the other team car had an accident in practice, and the Swedish driver hauled Richard out of the car and said, I better drive this, we're in Sweden after all. I think after the disappointment of the treatment he had from Bernie and the disappointment of the Swedish event, Richard, I think, pretty much gave up driving and was and is a very successful car. Here's John Findlay McIntosh in his 1957 Mark 11 Cooper. Every year, Cooper did what lots of manufacturers did and made slight tweaks to the cars, which may not have made much difference to the performance, but meant that everybody had to come and buy a new one to make sure they got the current model. We also remember that John Cooper really launched the Mini Cooper when Minis were racing in their early days. It was realized they could do with more power and stronger wheels, and eventually did a deal with BMC that I think paid the Cooper company £1 royalty for each Mini Cooper made, which at the time was quite a good deal. Charles Reynolds in the Mark 7 with 1100cc twin-cylinder Jap engine hurls it through the S's and round semicircle. These cars, well, cars of this type won the HillClimb Championship, and Ken Wharton, then the Bosch and Joneses, and David Good, and HillClimb these very successfully. And our last Cooper is in the hands of Fraser Dean. Vic Dean did a 56.49. Fraser, who is the junior member of the family, was at the first runs fractionally quicker. What did Vic did? It at a 56.49, yeah, 54.75. So he takes home the goodies, such as they are. I'm going to hand back to Peter, who knows much more about motorcycles than I do.
so on the hill at the moment. It is the 250cc Honda of Keith just rounding the Torreys and heading up now to Pardon. Through towards the S's, then comes the Honda. Looks like a pretty good run so far, just using all the track there out of the S's and into semicircle. As we see the aerial 250, the other 250 bike that we have here today, the aerial bike of Harvey Mills. Time for Keith Ruddock was a 63.23. So that's the target for Harvey Mills on the 265 machine. Still pushing hard there through the S's and on up to semicircle lane. Then Doug Parnell on the Ducati, 56.26 for Harvey Mills on the aerial. As we see the 350cc Ducati, as I say, 310, the bike of Doug Parnell. Coming up through midway on towards the S's. The Italian machine continues its way up out of the S's in towards semicircle. Around there, we see all the way around and towards the finish line, but then we pick up Simon Wilson on the Yamaha RD 350, 56.84 Doug Parnell's time. There's the time there for the 350, very close to the 250 times in fact. Simon Wilson then, as I say, on the RD 350, much coveted machine, or all the RD Yamahas much coveted these days. And he comes up to the line, and that's a quicker time, it's a 54.52 for Simon. Kirsty Glover is out there now on the Velocet 350, going up towards Pardon. Of course was one of the Grand Prix classes back many years ago. They had their own Grand Prix that engine size. Kirsty continue then on up the hill. As around Pardon comes Christopher Ewins on his 350 Suzuki, and the time for Kirsty Glover then is a 75.08 on the Velocet. We switch back to the Suzuki 350 of Christopher Ewins. That upright position, or quite a high up position, with a sort of off-road inspired bike coming around semicircles to the finish line. Into Pardon though comes the second of the Velocets today, the 390 Velocet of John Bottomley. 64.98 Christopher Ewins time. John Bottomley, as I say, on the 390cc Velocet. 507 bike, foot down as he comes through the S's. British bike following up the hill, and there is the Greaves of Steve Atkins, 400cc machine once again. 69.69 John Bottomley records as the Greaves then comes through the S's. As I say, had much success in the old scrambling, now motocross. Mike Wade on the aerial with the Jap engine, 500cc machine, 540. Coming around Pardon, 58.86 for Steve Atkins. Mike Wade, through the S's. On Pardon now comes Aidan Stafford on the Honda, the Sierra 450. 68.76 seconds for Mike Wade on the aerial. As the Honda then comes around the S's, and we see the KTM 373cc machine of Reg Davis. KTM, who are back into motorsport these days, enjoying some success as well on the tarmac as well as on the off-road. Aidan Stafford does a 55.24. See the 551 machine of Reg Davis coming up to the S's. And around semicircle towards the finish line, and the time will be a 57.55 for a Reg. And then we'll pick up Mr. Petey on the Husqvarna. Scandinavian machine coming through the S's. And behind Richard is the Yamaha TTR 600 of Neil Tamlin going around Paddock. Good time for Richard Petey, a 52.81. Tamlin continues his way up the hill on that 600cc Japanese bike. And we get the Tricati, Nigel Glover, the Ducati frame with the Triumph engine on that bike. Neil Tamlin meanwhile goes at 58.78 as Nigel Glover goes around Pardon. The S's then goes to Tricati. Mystery band 736, don't have a name unfortunately for the rider. 55.84, good time for Nigel Glover on the 720 bike, Ducati. As the 736 machine continues his way up into the S's. Over the line, there goes Mike Fiddler on those 50s Suzuki. We see Dick Sinkins on the Honda XPR 598cc machine. To the finish line comes the Honda in a time of 56.27 seconds. Riding the KTM 796cc bike is Dave Peat, bike number 9, and he comes through the S's, and this looks like it could be a quick time as well for the KTM. While Nigel Wheatley is on the rather older BSA Rocket 3 850cc, beautiful machine. This one dating from about 1969, I think. 50.42 then for Dave Peat on the KTM. Wheatley is through midway onto the S's. We see another KTM, this is the Duke 790 of Mark Stafford, bike number 853 comes into Pardon. Nigel Wheatley records a 58.92, very respectable time on the Rocket 3. So Mark Stafford pushing hard on the KTM Duke at the moment. Around to the line then comes Mark Stafford on that KTM Duke. There's a 54.39 as Hannes Tanter on the Harley Davidson rounds Pardon. Valentino Rossi style as he comes around. So we got a 57.72. Meanwhile, our lone sidecar outfit is on the hill coming into Pardon. That's Mark and James Foster on their Foster BMW 1070cc BMW engine in that frame of theirs. It's the 974 machine. Bike's been rescheduled ever so slightly to because they have a runoff to come across at the end of the day, so we'll be going back to cars in just a moment. As up to semicircle comes the Foster BMW outfit and heads for the finish line to record a time of 65.88 seconds.
Okay, back to four wheels with Maxwell Shand in this rapid sprite, very rapid. Speed 64 miles an hour under the bridge through that speed trap. Has he scattered a few bits of gravel? No, I don't think so. So this run might be in the sort of 53 mark, which is good. I think so far the fastest on scratch in the Austin Healers has been the 100M. Whee, that was a little bit wide out of S's by Max Shand. But it's a low 50s, it's a 53.29, which is great. Michael Berry takes off in his 100M modified. Tell the 100M by its louvers in the bonnet to let that extra heat out. And a lot of these went to the States. And I think in the States you tended to buy an ordinary Austin Healey 100, and then the dealer got the modification bits to make it go faster and to change the bonnet. In this country I think you got your 100M fully built up. Ooh, just got away with it, slight touch of the cone there, but no harm done, I don't think. Going really quickly, but I think he might have had to lift off quite a lot, so it's actually a 56.81 for Mike Berry. He's followed by the white one in the hands of John Duck. We'll get a replay of wow, yes, that's what happens if you go into the S's a bit too quick. It's a very tricky series of questions. Now, what's happened to John Ducker? Is he going to continue very slowly up the hill? I think the marshals there on the way up into Pardon will probably direct him down the hill and back into the paddock. What a shame. I don't know if John's Austin Healey has come here under its own steam or whether it sits on a trailer, but it's always embarrassing when the car you're hoping to drive home in gets damaged or has a mechanical failure. Hi from New Zealand, 3:15 a.m. Sunday morning. Wow, what a good time to watch Prescott. Stephanie, thanks for contacting us. I'm not sure, Richard, how many messages we had. Tom Rentom, who often talks to us. Hello from Germany. As always, a very good live stream, very cool vehicles, and the right mood for the 24th NOS. 24-hour Nürburgring, of course. Prescott's new historique meeting is bathed in sunshine. Yeah, it is. Well, sort of bathed most of the time in sunshine. It's been a great day. Is this the hill climb from Top Gear? Well, yeah, the Top Gear boys did come here a couple of times. They once had some young blades in a Subaru, I think, up against an old gentleman in a Frog Eye. and it was all about are the youngsters as quick as the old boys, and the old boy in the frog eye was much quicker than this souped up Subaru. Claire Giles off the line in the early 6-cylinder Austin Healey, the 106, which actually I don't think was as quick in period as the last version of the 4-cylinder car. It was a bit bigger and a bit heavier, and I don't think it did have the rather clever folding windscreen or sliding down windscreen of the 100 4-cylinder car, which you could sort of undo a couple of buckles, and the windscreen, the base of the windscreen went forward, the top came back, and you had almost an aero screen. Very clever. So here comes Claire, much more dignified passage through the S's on her way to semicircle. Meanwhile, this pretty little Austin Healey Sebring of Steve Casson, in again in colours supporting Ukraine. And I hope Chris Wigdorf, with his Mallock, that he's specially resprayed in support of Ukraine, and I think he's offering people information on how to contribute, and already he's raising a lot of money. In particular, one of the funds is going to produce an armoured ambulance for the Ukrainian army, and Dave Richards, who's chair of UK Motorsport, has already contributed 25 grand out of his own pocket for this ambulance. Now Rob Owen in the frog eye heads towards the finish. It says on screen that John Ducker's coming back in the white Healey. It is. I think he might have popped a little bit more fuel in it, but it's going fine now. Robert Owen in the frog eye, 55.86. That's a good time for frog eye spray. Let's see how John Ducker gets on this time. Well, he's got as far as the S's. No problem at all. Nice neat line through the S's, wide approach to Tom Rote corner. And safely round semicircle up to the finish to record a 58.6. On the hill is Trish Cecile Pritchard in another 6-cylinder Austin Healey. Austin put out the word that they were looking for a design of sports cars to put into mass production, and invited people to bring a prototype along to the Earls Court Motor Show. And I think only two companies did, Healey and Fraser Nash. Fraser Nash produced a Fraser Nash Targa Florio model with Austin Healey, Austin running gear, Austin engine, rear axle, and so on. And Leonard Lord walked swiftly past the Fraser Nash stand, hardly glancing at their offering, went straight to Healey and said, "This is the one we're going to do." And actually, commercially, it's been a great success. Lawrence Maudsley in the Sprite, 58.43. We're watching Pete Walton in a slightly younger 3-litre version, BT7 series of the 6-cylinder Austin Healey. Interesting that the 6-cylinder version had a much smaller air intake for the radiator than the 4-cylinder version. Here's a nice Sprite with a, I guess, detachable hardtop replacing the boot lid, but it looks very effective, nice, probably more aerodynamic, gives you a few more miles an hour. Time for Pete Walton, 53.39, good time. And off the line goes Richard Mason in this very much modified and very rapid Healey Mark II, making wonderful noises from that straight 6 engine. Has got the mini flap on the roof, which the rally cars always used to sport, in a failing attempt to get the cockpit a little bit cooler. They were terribly hot inside. The exhaust pipe, as you've seen, exits just in front of the near side rear wheel, just where the left hip of the co-driver or navigator is sitting, and so they got outrageously hot, particularly on a rally like Liège-Rome-Liège, which took a lot of it was over Alps in hot summer weather. Richards finished with 52.75. Similar car follows in the hands of Ian Thomas. 1962 car. The last version of the Austin Healey had wind-up windows and quarter lights and was generally much more luxurious, but inevitably, of course, a little bit heavier than the previous cars. Here comes Garashand in a Mark V Sprite. I think the last Sprites had fully circular wheel arches at the back and a Triumph Spitfire engine, which some people might look down on a bit. I've lost my timing screen, so I can't tell you times if I miss them on the big screen. Richard, I don't know if you can send someone to recover it. We're watching Edward Giles. Time 55.67 for Garrett, got that one. Here's Edward Giles in the Austin Healey 3000 from 1963. When did the big Healey cease production? I think in about 65 or so, maybe a little later. Keep an eye on the time for Ed Giles. Coming up to the finish to record a time of 59.15. He's followed by Philip Gardner in the 1969 Sprite. Here he is, again with a nice streamlined hardtop. So the little Sprite in the hands of Philip Gardner, 56.42. He's followed by Robert Murray-Shand. Well, it says 1972 Austin Healey, so they must have gone on much longer than I thought. And Robert is followed by Paul Baker on with the unique today, Jensen Healey. Jensen Healey was, I think, was the final car produced by the Jensen company. He had a modified Vauxhall engine of the type that Colin Chapman used in some of his later notices. So we'll keep an eye on the time of Paul Baker. And we switch to Reliance with Peter Smith in the Reliance Scimitar SS1. Let's keep an eye on Paul Baker's time, just crossing the line for a 52.02. That's really good. Here's Peter Smith in the Reliance Scimitar SS1. This was Reliance's last attempt producing their own sports car. I think the body was designed by Michelotti, the Italian guy, and unfortunately not many people admired it greatly. But it was, well done. Getting my times back. But the SS1, particularly the turbocharged version, was quite a nice, quick car, simple little sports car, but it wasn't good enough and didn't sell enough to rescue the Reliant company, which is a shame. They'd produced some great cars, some of which we've seen here today. We usually have a squadron of MX-5s. Time for Peter Smith, 62.43. The world's best-selling sports car, and deserved to be. MX-5 is a great fun car. And here's Charlie Delahunty in his version from 2004. And usually as cars get developed over the years, they get heavier and heavier. But the current MX-5, which has had rave reviews in all the comics, is actually, I think, lighter than the original car, which is quite an achievement. 61.8 for Charlie. Now we're following the MGB Roadster of Rob Orford and the TVR Vixen of Jeff Stallard. So we'll try and keep an eye on both of those cars. Robert's heading towards the finish. Be recording a 53.09. Good time in the MGB, because they're not by nature an extremely rapid car. Vixen, from the days before Peter Wheeler bought the TVR company, had all sorts of engines in the Vixen. MG, Triumph, Ford. And illustrating this is Steve Thomas in his version with a 1760 engine and slightly longer wheelbase. Jeff Stallard records a 52.48. Then came the Griffith, the first Griffith, which was a chassis like this, but with a 4.7 litre V8, and that was a fearsome beast. There's one that races at Goodwood and wins races. It's an extremely rapid car. So time Jeff Stallard 52.48. Here is Stuart Lobley in the Vixen. He's following Steve Thomas, who's finished with a 53.65. Steve Lobley, again a 1760 engine. And for a change of scene, he's being followed by a Triumph GT6. We'll see that pretty soon. But in the meantime, these nimble little Vixens are foxing their way up the hill. Here's the GT6. It's Mark II version. This was a Triumph Spitfire with a grown-up engine with a 2.5 litre straight six engine and a fixed hardtop. And they were sort of mini E-types, weren't they? Stuart Lobley 54.57. We're following Alan Voice, taking the GT6 through the S's. Fairly soft suspension, not over-modified, and probably still a nice road car as well. So he's heading for the finish and records a time coming up of exactly 57.54. Ian Bedingfield, long-time competitor in the 1977 Midget, 1500. Now, is that the one with the Spitfire engine? I'm not sure. I have a feeling it is. So Ian records a time of 58.5. Where's Jamie Fisher Pearson? Here he is, just passing the camera and into and out of S's, using every inch of road. Again, I think Triumph Spitfire powered. He's followed by the real thing, but records a time of 55.22. Yeah, it's a Spitfire. Competition, very much competition for the MG Midget and the Austin Healey Sprite. Sold in almost as great a number as the cars from BMC. Had swing axle rear suspension, which unmodified led to some interesting geometrics when you went round a quarter too fast with the outside wheel tucking in underneath and producing almost uncontrollable oversteer. But anyway, he's recorded a 60.13, and here's this fearsome Escort Mark II in the hands of Graham Miller. Real rally or rallycross spec, hugely powerful engine, very wide entry into the final bend out of the S's, but this might be in the 40s, just, maybe not, 50.27, just outside the 40s. You don't often see a Fiat X19 nowadays. They tended to succumb to corrosion terribly quickly, but it's really nice to see one in great condition, nicely modified, with its elephant scoop, like Formula One cars from the late 1970s, feeding cool air into the carburetor. Now a change of scene. TVR Tusk. Is it a Tuscan? Yes, it is. TVR Tuscan with the 4.6 litre Rover engine in the hands of Rob Pack. Jonathan Plough in the Spitfire 5304. Here's Noor Ali in the MX-5, slightly older than the one we saw before. Noor taking a nice line through the S's, nice black hardtop, detachable hardtop. And here's a rare car. We had a lovely weekend last weekend with honouring Italian cars, and here's a rare example, the Alfa Romeo 75. Not many left of these. They were interesting. I believe the 75 had a rear-mounted gearbox and a de Dion rear suspension, rather like the Alfetta of the same period. But again, it was a time when Fiat and Alfa Romeo did a deal with Russia. Fiat installed the Togliatti plant making the Fiat 124 in Russia, which became the Lada. But in exchange, they had to take Russian steel, bodywork steel, sheet, which I think was made of old rusty nails. And as a result, in that period, Lancia, Fiat, Alfa Romeo got a terrible reputation for rust. You know, the cars, particularly the Lancia Beta, do you remember that? That would rust away within 3 years. And it did them untold damage. TVR Griffith 500 with the 5 litre Rover engine, such a pretty bodywork, time 58.02. Paul Holmes this time was a 59.35. Noor Ali we saw in the MX-5, 54.41, good time. Here's Josh Climo. Is that the same Scimitar or a different one? I think it's a, well, we'll see. The number is 120. No, it's a different one. Same colour, same shape. Don't know if it's turbocharged. Don't think so. It doesn't say so anyway. Bit of understeer into the first left-hander of the S's, but came through it okay. Another MX-5, this time in the hands of Andy Johnson. And it's an early one. The first MX-5 was imported into this country, I think, in 1989. And this one is, it's 2004. And a rare car, the Ginetta G4, from the days when Ginetta were run by the Walklet brothers, but now Ginetta's in different hands. Malcolm Tomlinson runs the company with great success, and their race series, which accompanies the British Touring Car Championship, is a huge success, particularly Ginetta Junior, which is a great nursery, if you like, for 14-year-olds who don't want to go go-karting. It's quite expensive, but it's less expensive than top-level karting. Steve Mogg, familiar to us all in his 5 litre Griffith. Many people regard the Griffith as the prettiest of the Wheeler era TVRs. Mechanically, they were pretty much identical to the Chimera. Chimera might have had slightly softer springs and a different body, but the Griffith was great. 48.19 is a really good time. And this MX-5 is in the hands of Emma Ali. So, family MX-5 competition. Emma taking fairly wide line through the S's, keeping well away from the Armco sensibly. So if she's under 60, she'll be doing well. 56.12, yeah, that's great. Here's Nigel Watkins in the Porsche 996 from 1998. So 3.4 litre flat 6 engine. way out behind the back of the car, which gives it great traction off the line. 2.75 for the first 64 feet is pretty good. 2.68 for Nigel, even better, and a 52.21. Here's Howard Barnard through Pun in his early-ish MX-5. They hold their prices well, MX-5s. They're great value for money, just to have some fun in the summer. And the first of our Boxsters, I think I haven't seen one before this. This is John Austin. This is the one with a 3.2 litre engine. The Boxster first came along with 2.5, then 2.7, and finally 3.2. And renowned for absolutely brilliant handling and road holding. Great cars. And now the early ones are on the market at prices that are quite a bargain. If it's been well looked after, it doesn't really matter what mileage it's done. Porsches tend to go on forever if they're well looked after. So a 55.6 for John Austin. Phil Ludbrook in the Honda S2000, which introduced variable valve timing to Honda sports cars, and you could rev the S2000 to what I think the red line was 8,000 or so. And another Ginetta, this is the fastback G20, the GT4 version of the G20. And our final car of the afternoon is the newish Porsche Boxster of Steel Lyle, which we'll see in a second or two. And then we come to motorcycles, so I'm going to hand back to Peter Hughes. Here he is.
So thanks yet again to Chris. We come to the last action of the day basically here at Prescott, which is the top 10 runoff for the bikes competing in the National Hill Climb Association Series. And those top 10 selected, of course, based on their times, best times on the hill. And the first bike that we will see is the 310 bike of Doug Parnell. The 350cc Ducati at a time of 56.84 up the hill on his first run, on his earlier runs I should say. This is his best time. 58 miles an hour then under the bridge for Doug. Ducati goes around Victoria's and on up the hill into Pub. Just the one run for the top 10 runoff, and one chance to grab the honours then from this runoff. Through the S's then goes the Ducati. Up the hill towards semicircle. 56.84 to say was Doug's earlier time. Could he better that one though? He seems to be having problems. He seems to have slowed dramatically, unfortunately, because he records a time of 70.63. So I think mechanical problems there, unfortunately for Doug Parnell. Next up, 265 is Harvey Mills in the on the 250cc aerial, and away he goes. Looks to be a little bit off the line there, and 60 miles an hour then under the bridge, comes into Ettores. So Doug Parnell's time, first intermediate time was 27.25, a 25.88 going into Pardon. Means that Harvey Mills is maybe a second and a half quicker on the opening section, and now well, we can see just what sort of problems Doug Parnell unfortunately was having, because Harvey taking time out of him all the way through this run, going into semicircle now, nearly 10 seconds quicker as he gets into semi. His time was a 55.94 in the first run. He does improve on that, with it takes 7/10 of a second off it to do a 55.24. Next away Nigel Glover, who did a 55.84 in his 2 runs. He's going to have to improve on that to get ahead of Harvey Mills on this top 10 runoff. The 720, the Tricati, this sort of mongrel machine really, with the Triumph engine, Ducati frame. He's a 10th of a second down at Pardon on Harvey Mills. Goes on up the hill and seems to be dropping time all the way. He's dropping tenths, not huge amounts, but he is dropping time then, despite the greater engine capacity. He's now nearly half a second down as he goes into semi. He goes up to the line. He's not, I don't think, going to match his previous time. He does a 56.31, so it is still Harvey Mills who leads the way. Now, what can Aidan Stafford do on the Honda CRF 450? He did a 55.24 in the 2 runs, which is exactly the time that Harvey Mills had set in this top 10 runoff, and he is quicker by nearly 4/10 of a second on the first section of the hill. Another time as he comes into Pardon, we'll see how he's doing there, and he's 1.4 seconds up, so he's really improving on his earlier times, at the moment at least. Nearly over a second and a half quicker at midway, and 1.3 seconds quicker at the S's, so he's losing a little bit of time on that intermediate time, but then picks it back up again at semi. He's maybe a second and a half quicker again now. Up to the finish line, 55.24 the time to beat. He does a 54.03, and Aidan Stafford moves into the lead. And Simon Wilson, another person who has to find time compared to his earlier runs, because his best run was a 54.52 on the opening or during the 2 runs. He was just 400ths down at the very early stage, the 64 feet mark, which really doesn't give us a huge guide. We'll have one now as he comes into Pardon, and he is 3/10 down then as he came into Pardon on the RB 350 compared to the time of Aidan Stafford. Aidan in that 450cc Honda CRF. Just a tiny bit between midway and the S's, but then drops a bit of time. He's half a second down as he goes into semicircle, comes up towards the line now, and his time is a 53.89, and he has beaten the time of Aidan Stafford, made up time on that very last section. So the 53.89 compared to his 54.52 earlier on in the day. Mark Stafford has to find half a second on his earlier runs if he is now to take the lead. Mark on the KTM Duke 790cc machine, again slightly quicker on the very initial stage of the hill, and still just hundredths in it as he goes into Pardon on this top 10 runoff. Still hundreds in it. He's dropped 300ths in fact, but runs very, very wide and virtually comes to a halt. In fact, does come to a halt, and that really has cost him any chance he had. He continues on his way, and it is now 7 seconds down. So unfortunately, pushing hard and just that tiny little error is enough to drop him way down. And I think probably Doug Parnell is probably going to be the only person that he is quicker than at the moment as he cruises over the line with a 65.70. So Simon Wilson it is who leads the way. Next up it'll be Dick Sinkins on the 600cc Honda XBR. His time was a 53.63, so he was quicker than Simon Wilson's current best time in this runoff. And he looks to be pushing hard on the run towards Ettores. Around that long right-hander he goes then. Powers his way now up towards Pardon, and he stops the clock just a tenth of a second quicker than Simon Wilson was on his run, and drops time then to midway. He's 4/10ths down now as he goes through midway, or very nearly, and much the same at the S's, 0.39. What will he be at semi-in? He's 7/10ths down at semi-in, so he is dropping time to Sinkins, and he comes to the finish line with a time very nearly a second down, 54.82. It's still Simon Wilson who leads the way, and Dick Sinkins over a second slower than his earlier run. Richard Peaty is on the line now. Richard did a 52.72 in the two runs earlier on. Down there as he runs towards Torres. Actually making contact with the ground, but foot out, as so many of the racers do these days. He's coming up to Pardon, and he's half a second up at Pardon, so he's on course for quickest time in this runoff at the moment. And it makes up another 300s coming to midway. Goes into the S's and continues to pick up time. He's 0.64 up then at the S's. He's coming to semi-in. He's nearly a second up at semi-in. He's heading for the line, and it looks like this could be the quickest time so far. He drops some time, but still is quickest, 53.36. And again, slower than his run earlier on, but enough at the moment to put him at the top and a best of third place. Mike Fiddler then, who did a 51.78 earlier on. And Mike on the 736 bike, the 750 Suzuki, he was nearly quarter second up at that very first timing point, and he's 6/10ths up as he goes into Pardon. He's continuing to pick up time, over a second up at midway, and another 2/10ths picked up to the S's. How will he do to semi-in? A second and a half up now as he comes around semi, just run to the finish line, and his time is a 51.50. He now moves into the lead. Down to second place goes Richard Peaty. We have just one more bike left to run, and that is Dave Peat, who did a 50.25. If he can repeat that, he will win this runoff, but can he do it is the question on the KTM 800cc machine. So Dave Peat, bike number 9. Around Ettores. Opens it up for the run up to Pardon. Into Pardon. What's he doing? He's over a second and a quarter up at Pardon. Runs out very wide on the exit of Pardon, but just keeps it on the black stuff, and is now 1.4 seconds up at midway. Another time coming up for us now, and it's 1.6 up, so just picking up tenths all the way up to, when he's wide on the exit of the S's, up to semi-in, where he's dropped a tenth. He's still a second and a half up. Around semi-in, he goes for the finish line, and he's the first bike to get under the 50-second mark today with a 49.66 seconds. It is a win for number 9, Dave Peat. In second place, it's 7:36, Mike Fiddler, and in third place, 5:53, Richard Petty. So some good, exciting action there in our top 10 runoff, and hats off to the bike riders and everyone who's competed today. Once again, a big thank you to all of our marshals and officials. Thank you to all the competitors for the entertainment that they've provided, and thanks as well for the support that we've enjoyed from various organisations. It really has been good to see so much support here today, and the various championships that have been competing for championship points today. It's great to remember Sir Stirling Moss OBE. Really good to welcome the Association of Heritage Engineers and their ambassadors. Thank you to them as well. And we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible back for future events here at Prescott. And next up on the 18th of June, it's Porsche at Prescott. That's on the Saturday, and on the Sunday there's a Midsummer Club meeting. And don't forget Bike Fest on the 26th of June. Lots more action to come throughout the course of the season though. All the information you need is on the Prescott Hill Climb website. But for the moment, for myself, Peter Hughes, and from Chris, thanks very much for your support today. Thank you for coming along. We hope you've had a great day, and have a safe journey home. And we'll see you again, once again, very soon. Bye for now.